Becoming Who I Needed is a podcast where I discuss all things sex, love, and relationships, replacing and recreating all the unhealthy, untrue beliefs we've been taught with information and practices that reconnect us with our bodies and back to pleasure. Hello, and welcome. Thank you to everyone who is listening. I am Kat. This is my first episode, so I decided to ride solo and explain a bit about my intention for this podcast and how it all came to life. So for the last 11 years or so, I have been working in the medical field as an ultrasound tech, where I performed ultrasound exams on females and mothers-to-be. One day at work, I brought a patient in to my exam room, and I'm confirming her date of birth. She's very sweet. She's very shy. I can tell she came in alone. And as I'm confirming her date of birth to make sure I have the right person, I realized that she was 13 years old. So I'm performing my exam. I'm explaining to her everything that I'm looking at as much as I can, because I like to inform my patient. I don't want to just sit there and be quiet, because then they just get nervous. And I get to know them while I'm with them. I like to try and start a conversation, make them feel comfortable. So as I'm explaining everything, she starts to ask me questions as well. And most of these questions had to do about her being pregnant and what to expect while she is pregnant. She was about 20 weeks, so halfway through her pregnancy. And I tried to answer everything as much as I could, but I also told her, hey, doctor's going to come in after, which they always do, even if everything is looking beautiful on the baby. They just pop in, say hello. So the doctor came in, and he's performing his exam as well. And he starts to have a conversation with her, asking her if this was a planned pregnancy, and she said no. And then he asked her if she was using any contraceptives. She got quiet. She looked at me kind of confused, and I can tell right away that she didn't understand what the word contraceptive meant. Long story short, she left my exam room, but this patient was stuck in my head for the rest of the day. I couldn't stop thinking about her. And there was no specific reason other than it just hit me that the education about sex in this country is pretty terrible. So I started thinking about my own relationship with sex and how I was taught about it. Both of my parents are from Peru, and if anybody has foreign parents, then they can understand that sex, anything to do with it, especially if you are female in the family, and especially if you're the youngest female in the family, you don't discuss it at all. It was not open for discussion. There was no information given to me. Even when it came to my period, my mom did not explain a lot to me. So growing up, there was a lot of confusion, a lot of curiosity and insecurity when it came to my body and what was going on with it. From when I started having my period at 12 years old, things were rapidly changing. And I didn't know how to navigate all of these new emotions, these new sensations, these new feelings that I was having. As I got older, as I entered into high school and I was starting to have boyfriends, I became more aware of wanting to be popular, about wanting to be liked and noticed by boys. But I also knew nothing about my body and what was happening and what I was feeling, wanting to maybe take it a little further with them. But again, I had zero education on sex or even how to navigate all the hormones that were rushing through my body. This led to me feeling very vulnerable, I was very easily influenced. All my friends were having boyfriends and making out, and some were having sex. So I felt a lot of pressure and insecurity and a lot of shame, which is why the topic of sex is so important to me. Even though my parents never sat me down to discuss sex, there was this unspoken rule that it was forbidden, leaving me to think that sex was bad and sinful even. And I didn't dare to question or challenge this belief in fear of getting in trouble and being misunderstood. Today, my relationship with my parents is amazing. We have a beautiful relationship, but that was not always the case. We didn't know how to communicate when I was younger. They didn't know how to approach me and educate me on certain subjects because they didn't have any education themselves growing up. But I felt unsafe and afraid to ask any questions related to sex, my body, dating even. And this left me very insecure, curious, and very vulnerable. Now looking at experiences that I had with partners at a young age, I unfortunately see how they were unsafe and they were also unwanted. And a lot of those unwanted experiences, as much as I tried to convince myself that I wanted them at the moment, I now as an adult can reflect and see that they weren't okay. I shouldn't have been in those situations or scenarios. They could have been worse, and I didn't know how to navigate them properly. I lost my virginity at 16, and yeah, it was not a very pleasant experience. He wasn't even my boyfriend. We weren't even dating. I think we were just friends, and it was fine. I was safe, but it really just wasn't a pleasant experience. And it wasn't until I was 17 that I got into my first real relationship, which I can say hands down was also my worst and most toxic relationship. Because again, I didn't know any better. I didn't have any education around what a healthy relationship was. I didn't feel safe to talk to my parents. I had really no one to confide into. And so ultimately, I felt very alone, going through experiences where I would have loved some guidance and some answers. Because when you're young and you don't have any idea what you're doing when it comes to sex, you go to the next best source, which is, for most, porn, your friends. So yes, this was a very toxic relationship, my first love. And I found out that the 2 years that we were together, he was literally cheating on me every single opportunity he had. I think he basically had 2 girlfriends. So this broke my heart. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to think. My self-esteem plummeted. My ego was extremely damaged. And this was my first taste of insecurity, of not feeling worthy, of not feeling good enough, hot enough, all the negative things, bunch of cold pricklies all over my body. I was just sad and really broken with really no one to talk to about it. So I tried to do what I thought would make me feel better at the time, which was try and boost my ego the best I could, which meant going out, feeling sexy, or at least trying to validate myself by hooking up with other guys. Imagine that didn't end up too well. And this continued until I started another relationship where I still wasn't ready. I still had no idea what a healthy relationship was, and my ego was still very damaged from my previous relationship. This was a long-distance relationship, way more opportunities for insecurities to set in when you're far away from the person you want to be with. Very curious as to what they're doing. Are they with somebody else? You just don't know. So I became the asshole in this scenario. I cheated on him just so that I could make myself feel better because I wanted to have the upper hand. Surprise, surprise, that relationship ended. And while I should have probably taken more time to myself, I don't think it was more than, 4 or 5 months after that relationship that I found myself once again in another relationship thinking that I'm in love. And I was in love. This relationship started very beautifully. We were best friends, at least, again, this is my perspective. I don't know if you were to ask him that now, what he would think, but my story, my podcast. But yeah, it started out to be a nice relationship and nothing really went wrong. There's nothing that one person did. It was just me learning to be independent, growing and wanting different things and being more aware of the changes that I was feeling. But it took me a long time to step out of the relationship because, again, I didn't want to hurt him, so I bottled up my own emotions and I became a very not aggressive. Maybe I'm being too harsh on myself, but I was not a nice person. I saw that. I saw that I was becoming more irritable. I was easily triggered. We got into a lot of fights, and I was very mean. I would argue to hurt. I didn't argue to be constructive or for trying to solve anything. I think he even called me bipolar at one time, which, obviously was the wrong thing to say at that point, to say to me, to call me. But now I can look at it and laugh because totally understand why he thought that. But I just wasn't feeling good. I knew that something wasn't right and I needed to figure out how to get out of it. I felt very trapped. But it was me. It wasn't anything that he had done. It was just mostly me realizing that this is not what I want and I don't know how to ask for what I want or communicate what I want and what I need. But eventually I found the strength to walk away from this relationship. So after I just kind of dated a little bit, dating apps started coming along. So tried my hand at those, went on a few dates, had some fun. And again, just doing all the things that I thought I needed to feel good, to feel wanted, to feel desired, and was looking in all the wrong places. I unfortunately found myself in bed with a lot of people, not a lot, please don't freak out, Dad, but I found myself in too many situations that I honestly didn't really want to be in. When my body was trying to tell me no, I tried to convince myself with, no, we want this, let's just do it, and then I felt very empty afterwards. So fast forward, long story short, I moved to California about 3 years ago, and this was the first time that I was able to be by myself. I was starting from scratch. I didn't know anybody in California, but I decided that I wanted to experience living in a completely different environment, different state. And I got settled in. I made an incredible group of girlfriends that I love so much. And then one day I stumbled into a party while I was out with some girlfriends, not out with the intention to meet anybody, but just out with the intention of having fun and allowing whatever the night brought to me come to me. But it brought a 6'3", blue-eyed, handsome guy with a very nice beard and a Tree of Life necklace, which at the time was all I needed to pique my interest, apparently. So what probably was intended of just being a night of fun ended up being an almost 2-year relationship. And while we are no longer together, this was so far the healthiest relationship I had ever been in, and my favorite relationship I've been in. It started out very passionately, very fun. I felt very comfortable with him. So that in turn made sex incredible for me because I felt safe. I felt confident to try different things and fully express myself how I wanted to, or at least the most I had ever allowed myself to. And this was super important to me. Being able to fully express myself and feel comfortable was a new concept. So of course, I felt very much in love with him. And while I hoped that feeling would have lasted forever, it didn't. Things shifted between us. I began to feel less confident, more insecure, more jealousy, more fear of being hurt, and not knowing how to communicate what I needed or what I was feeling because I was afraid of rejection or not hearing what I wanted. No matter how much we tried to work it out, it just wasn't working. So I decided to end the relationship, and that was about 6 months ago, and so much has changed in those last 6 months. Maybe the end of my relationship or the fact that we have been going through a pandemic for the last 2 years and everything is completely changed around the entire world, not just my world, has been a bit of a catalyst to make me look at my life from a different perspective. I have since left my job as an ultrasound tech after 11 years. I'm currently sitting in a hotel in Costa Rica, by myself because I decided to live nomadically for a little while as I answer the call to what I feel is now my life purpose. I decided to start with this podcast where I have conversations, all the conversations that I wish someone would have had with me when I was younger about sex, love, and relationships. Because I can finally say with all the confidence that I am, at least right now, at this moment, becoming who I needed when I was younger. The person that I would have liked to have spoken to when it came to all these topics, that I would have been able to go to for guidance, for love, for support, for encouragement. And that is all I want to create. A safe and judgment-free space where we can all talk about sex freely, whether it's how to talk to kids and teens about sex and their bodies and healthy relationships, or how we as adults wish we would have known more about these topics because we can see how they profoundly influenced our lives. Because think about it. Think about what your education was when you were younger about sex. We are raised in a society that teaches sex to be an inappropriate topic to discuss. It's wrapped up in shame and guilt, leaving us feeling embarrassed and insecure about something that comes naturally to us and should be celebrated rather than silenced. And as women, we're unknowingly programmed to believe that our worth is in our bodies. It's either to create life or to give pleasure. So these last few months, I have been learning to unlearn all the lies I've been taught around the subject of sex, and I want to replace them with positive, healthy perspectives and to heal all the ways in which this lack of education hurt me throughout my life. And I'm not a parent. I don't have children, so I don't know what it feels like to want to protect your child from ever having to feel any hurt or pain. But now, feeling safe, supported, and so much love from my parents, we've been able to talk about the way that I was raised and how I wish I could have came to them for guidance. That my fear to ask them any questions around the subject was as strong as their fears of me ever being taken advantage of. But out of fear comes disaster. They didn't speak to me because they believed that not talking about it would mean it would never happen, because they were also conditioned to have unhealthy beliefs around sex. We learn the sexual language we're surrounded by, and when it's spoken with shame, anger, guilt, and judgment, that is how we will grow with it. I was left with no compass or roadmap on how to have healthy relationships, how to advocate for myself, and to speak up when something didn't feel right. In fact, I was so disconnected from my own body that it became easier to just submit to people so that I could feel wanted or loved, even for just a moment. And this left me bitter and angry when expectations weren't met, and I was clueless on how to allow these emotions express themselves because I was taught that good girls do what they're told, they obey, they stay quiet, and if they do have emotions that they're too much or being too dramatic, immediately being dismissed in what I was feeling or experiencing. Which brings me to today, to right now and the woman I'm becoming, and my desire to create a new story around sex for myself and for everyone. I want to dedicate my life to learning how to live fully in my pleasure and joy, where I stop being afraid to express myself however I want because it's looked at as inappropriate or offensive to someone else. I want to reconnect with my body and learn how to listen to her better, no longer ignoring what my body is trying to tell me or abandoning my beliefs to please others. And I'm so committed to learning this healthier, more beneficial language around sex that I've even joined a coaching program with sex expert Layla Martin, where after this year, I will be able to create my own love language to communicate with you all. So, if you're still with me, I thank you so much for listening, and I hope you continue to join me each week while I sit down with guests and learn how their education around sex influenced their lives in all the best and maybe worst ways. How they've adapted practices into their lives where they love their bodies and live their lives with pleasure. Okay, guys, that is all I have for you today. If you have any feedback, comments, or just want to chat about this episode, then feel free to send me an email at becomingwhoineeded@gmail.com. And you can also find me on Instagram at becomingwhoineeded, where I'll be posting updates on upcoming episodes and guests, as well as my journey with my coaching course. And finally, if you did enjoy this podcast, I would so appreciate it if you could leave me a kind, loving rating on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you're listening from. And in case no one has told you today, I love you and I appreciate you. Bye.